Welcome to episode 3 of our Warmoth Strat kit build project series. Boy, it doesn't look too much like a Strat, does it? Let's find out what's going on as we start the next project. Okay, so we have decided to replace the frets in this neck. Yes, I heard you. We are going to be replacing the frets. Doing a couple different things, using heat with a soldering iron to hopefully break any glue that was underneath the frets, which as it turned out, there's no glue under these frets. So I stopped doing that and I continued to use this tool, which is new to me, but not new to the world. It's basically a really thin, flat piece of stainless steel with a slit cut right up the middle. And what you do with this is you pop the end of your fret and you slide this under the fret so the tang goes right through that slit. And then you work this across the fingerboard as you're lifting the fret with tools such as this, which is a fret puller pair of pliers. And in general, everything went well. Is this going to save the world? I don't know if it's that great. I have seen them sold by StewMac and other vendors, and this is another vendor. This came off of Amazon. You get 2 of them in a pack for $5 or something like that. I like the length of this. I think the StewMac ones are longer. So you just have to push it a little bit, let the fret removal pliers pop the fret up a little bit so this will slide through. And what this really is doing for you is keeping your tool from damaging the fingerboard as much as anything. It's also supposed to help keep there from being as much tear out, which I really didn't have an issue with tear out except for the first frets down at the heel where I was using heat. So we have to fix that a little bit. I am now going to hit the whole board with some 400 grit paper, just to knock down any little loose fiber ends where the frets did pull out. Once I get it sanded a bit, I'll be able to drop a little bit of super glue on those spots and it will harden and fill in the little bit of tear out that we have. Yes, the tear out that we have. We're in this together now. So let's get back to it as we continue the next project. So we're making the switch over to stainless steel fret wire on this guitar for no good reason, because the original frets had never been used. I guess that's no good reason. Picked up a pack of Jescar 57 110 pre-radius to 16, which means it's probably around 15. So since this fingerboard runs 12 to 20, I tightened the radius on a few of them up by the nut and kept checking as I went and flattened the radius as I got past maybe the 12th fret or so. The radius was continually flattening out. Just used my thumb and eased the fret wire a little bit flatter. So that all went pretty good. Now we're nipping back the tang, kind of, maybe like a 32nd of an inch, about a millimeter on either side of the fingerboard, narrower than the fingerboard, just so when I press the frets in, the tang will pretty much be hidden. Taping off the sides and the bottom of the fretboard just for safety. Also using some Bees paste wax on the top of the fingerboard. The reason for all of this is that I am using some CA, medium viscosity super glue basically, to set all the frets in. So once the CA is squeezed into the fret slots, I drop in a few frets and slide it over to the fret press and start squishing them in. And as I go, I change out the radius call, so to something as close as I can find to whatever the radius would be at that point in the neck. And since this goes from 12 to 20, I don't have that many calls. I need fractional calls, which, that makes me think. Maybe I'll invent a new tool. I know people make a fractal fret press. That's not in my budget. So maybe I'll come up with something shade tree mechanic like.
again, putting CA in the slots, dropping fret tangs into the slots, and then pressing away. And it all went really well. Wiping away the excess squeeze out of the CA as I was going. And again, that's another reason we have the bees paste wax and also the tape on there, just in case anything squeezes out. It's not getting on any surface that I really don't want it on. Frets are all pressed in and the fingerboard is cleaned up a little bit. Got a lot of that wax wiped off. I did go a little bit heavy on the wax, I think, but we're looking good. Nip the fret ends back using both a set of Stumac fret nippers and also some fast cap fret nippers. Here we're using the homemade beveling block and just a flat file that's meant for stainless work. I just press it into the block and go to town. Knock the bevel on the frets back to about 30 degrees roughly on this case. Here I'm using a flat tip X-Acto knife blade, scraping away any residual super glue that squeezed out from underneath the frets. Adjusting the truss rod to get the neck nice and flat again, give a little burp on the back, help the wood relax, dropping the locking nut into place, marking it, and using a drill bit that is way too long for this task, but it's the only one I could find at the time. Putting a little wax on the screw and pre-threading the holes, getting ready to add our rich light spacer that we took a look at a little while ago. Using my custom caulk tube with some sandpaper on it to round the edges to match where the neck meets the headstock. Drilled a couple holes and screwing the locking nut into place. It seems to fit. What do you know about that? Checking the frets, quick once over. I have a couple that are a little high, otherwise everything looks really good.
Well, some mistakes were made, and yet we recover anyway, because we've got a lot of practice fixing mistakes, right? So what happened there, and I was like, well, I have existing holes in the back. I'll use those to create a center hole so I know exactly where to drill from the front. 5 out of 6 were right on the money. One of them, for some reason, was off, and I didn't realize it, so I started sinking my new well in from the front, and all of a sudden I was like, that one doesn't look like it's in the right place. Fortunately, I was like, I think I used the wrong size Forstner bit anyway. I was using one that was too small, which was fortunate. So one mistake was followed by another, which the second mistake basically erased the first one. Once I upsized to the correct size Forstner bit to create the shallow well, I was able to push the center over to where it belongs and got all the center holes put where they belong. This is just between us, don't tell anybody. Let's continue the next project. We're at a point where we're ready to press the inserts into the body, and there's a potential issue. I have made a plate to prevent any tear out going forward, which is a good idea. Came to me a little bit late, but it's a good idea. But I've already got the holes drilled in this and in the body, and my concern now is that those holes aren't going to be 100% center to center with these holes, even though they measure out the same. There's potential for things to be a few thousandths of an inch off, which just means that the posts won't be going in 100% straight up and down. Don't know if that's going to be the case, but it could be the case. In hindsight, what I should have done is not drilled the holes, done all my routing, made the plate, dropped the plate in, used the holes in the plate to drill my holes into the body. Then I could oversize the holes in the body to fit the inserts. But I did things a little backwards. You know, we learn as we go. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to try to use this plate and press the bushings, the inserts into the body. Hopefully everything will go well. Possibly things will be off by a few thousandths of an inch. Hopefully it'll go together. Worst case scenario, I'll have to pull it all back apart. I'll plug the holes at that point. Use the plate to then drill holes through the plugs. Remove the plate, oversize the holes to fit the inserts, then press it all together because everything should line up then, right? Right. Okay. So let's try and press them in, and if we have to hit reverse and redo things, we'll just do that as we continue the next project. All right, we dodged a bullet. Everything went really well. The plate pressed in, was hammered in, smashed in. It went in. It fit. Is it perfect? Probably not. It's probably a couple thousandths of an inch off. I think plan B of using the plate to drill the pilot hole or drill the holes into the body would be a better plan in the future. So next time I'll do all my routing, I will make the plate or buy a plate with posts and use that to drill my location for the post holes instead of having post holes drilled into the body and then making a plate and hoping it fits. Because if it's off by just a hair, which I'm sure it was, but it went in and it looks good. Fortunately, the wood is soft enough, I think it's absorbing it. And I'm going to re-soak everything with super glue now to make sure it's hard and tight and not going anywhere. But it looks good. The post fit. I put in 2 additional anchor screws, but we're getting close. That went well. Lucked out. But plan B is probably the better plan in this case. Route, and then make the plate or get the plate. Use the plate to locate and drill the holes for the pivot posts instead of doing it the other way around. Next time, as we continue the next project.
Well, the time has finally come to install the tuners into the headstock, test fitting really. So I had to oversize the holes that were in the headstock already, run them up to about 3/8 of an inch. So I used a bit on the drill press and went about 2/3 of the way, maybe 3/4 of the way through the headstock, which gives the tuner body itself room to fit into the headstock. Then I squared everything up and drilled pilot holes for the mounting screws that go into the back. Put it all back together, spun the washer and the threaded nut down into the hole, and everything recesses in there really nice. It's gonna be sexy. Yeah.
We have a Telecaster bridge at the moment, strung up using old strings. Have the Telecaster bridge set so the radius is pretty uniform across the fingerboard. And remember, we're a 12 to 20 to, what would it be back here? You math people can tell me. What's probably 24 or 26 inch radius back here. Anyway, off topic. Old strings on it. I did not do a leveling of these frets with the strings off. I pressed them in, and then I went to this step. I'm trying to learn some things along the way. Even if you do a perfect fretboard leveling, radiusing, perfect pressing in of the frets, you still could have variations. The reason that is, and I've had people tell me that if I do it perfectly, you never have to level the frets. Well, that's a possibility. It's probably not reality. Reality is that fret wire is a manufactured product, and even the manufacturers will say there's a tolerance of variation within the fret wire. I think it's typically around 2/1000ths of an inch over such a length of wire. So you could potentially have frets that are ever so slightly different in size. And if you've ever measured frets, you'll realize that that is the case quite often. Put a straight edge on it, check the relief, got that set to about 6/1000ths at roughly the 7th fret. So that's all looking pretty good. And we're going to address a few high frets that I have. I use a fret rocker, which I've mentioned before. Don't trust fret rockers. They give you an idea, but get a double or a second or a third opinion. A lot of fret rockers don't have perfect edges. They're uneven, not perfectly straight. You'll have to either buy a bunch of these and find a good one or straighten them yourself. Also, the flat part of the steel can have a bow to it, which will throw off the fret rocker. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. But we're going to try and correct a few spots that are high without leveling the whole batch of frets. And we're going to start by using a reasonably new product, Music Nomad U file understring leveling. It's kind of like the StewMac Fret Kisser, just a little different. Gives you a wider leveling surface. I've used it a couple times before. Reasonably good results. I think it might be like 220 grit diamond coating in the middle on the bottoms, which is okay, I guess, if you need to do a lot of work. I don't know how well it will work on this because I think my variation in fret height is like 0.005 of an inch, which is causing my rocker to click. But if this doesn't do much for me, we may go back and try the understring leveling beam thing again. I like experimenting. I like challenging myself, trying to learn things. So we're going to try and knock down the few high frets, starting with this, see how that goes. If it doesn't work, I might go on to that beam. If that doesn't work, we're going to call it a day and go have a beer. Let's continue the next project.
This Gotoh locking nut comes with 3 brass shims, very, very thin, and very not quite so thin, but all of them were a little too thin. So then a light bulb went off in my head and I was like, I have some old Floyd Rose shims. So I broke those out and they range from, I think, 0.005 of an inch to 9,000 and a 12,000. So I ended up using the 9,000 thick shim. I had to sand the edges just a little bit. It was a little too large by just a hair. But the problem is, after I got it sanded and stuck in there, I checked some of the other shims that were in the bag. There were a couple others that were exactly the size I needed. So, I am a victim of my own doing. So we got the nut height set. We have good clearance, about 10 to 13 thousandths over the first fret. Checking for any buzz or anything, and we're looking good all the way up the neck. One thing we have to address now is the issue that's caused by locking nuts. Even with a break angle headstock like this, you can see that when the string is depressed, which is what the locking cap will do, it will pull the string sharp, pull it out of tune. So something that somebody invented once upon a time is a retainer. It's basically a string tree, but it goes all the way across. Now, you might be saying, well, why are you putting it so close to the nut? Well, I kind of have to in this case, because if I move it further toward the tuners, it would barely catch the high and low E strings. Fortunately, we don't have a truss rod adjustment at the nut, so I'm able to put it in nice and tight, pretty close to the locking nut itself. There'll be plenty of room to slide strings underneath it, and we are going to have a functional neck anytime now. Well, it looks like I've taken up too much of your time for one day already, so I want to thank you for hanging out with me during this project. I think we've made some pretty good progress. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. Comment. Love hearing from everybody all around the world. Let me know what you're up to, and let me know what else we can do to this guitar, which we have a lot of ideas already. But anyway, hit the thumbs up button because YouTube wants to know, and I'd like to know too. Ring the bell for future notifications. And above all, take care of yourself and those around you. Until next time, bye.